A common question you may have heard in recent years is the question of whether billionaires should exist. Do you think billionaires should exist? Let's examine how they became billionaires. And keep in mind, this includes many or most of the rich in general, whether they're billionaires, millionaires, or those in power. Did they work billions of times harder than everyone else? Or are they simply billions of times smarter? Obviously not. In fact, if you ever meet wealthy people, you'll often find how mediocre they are, unable to do basic tasks that poor and working people do every day. The billionaires in our system are the people who have control over the flow of money, either through banking, commerce, entertainment, the political system, big tech, or any of the increasing monopolies that the rich have created. The rich, with the help of politicians, created a system in which it is legal to buy off politicians through unlimited campaign donations, i.e. super PACs. This allowed them to create and change laws in their own favor, effectively stealing the money of poor and working people by making it legal. The vast majority of all money in our economy is funneled up to those who are already rich. Yet the majority of spending does not come from the rich. So this means they created a system in which they can take money out of the system that is not theirs. How? Let's look at the labor system. Workers are entitled to 100% of the profits they create, right? Maybe more, since they're often essential workers, and corporations make more than just profits with tax breaks and government handouts. So the workers should get 100+% of the profits they create, right? Why wouldn't they? Essential workers contribute far more to society than any billionaire or CEO. There is no earthly reason why the profits and production they create should not go to them. The only reason it happens is because business owners have more democratic power than workers, which incidentally isn't democratic at all, it's more authoritarian. No one voted for this system, nor would anyone ever vote for it. The US labor system is anti-democratic and anti-worker. No one would vote to give away profits that they created to people within the company who are already rich. That is why it has to be done within a forced system. Since the beginning of the United States, the rich have created labor laws that allow them to exploit and oppress workers. And although they have attempted to change their brand image, to pretend that they care about poor and working people and marginalized groups, the inherent truth has never changed. Let's look at the economy. Amazon is allowed to charge customers low prices not by fair market competition, but by spreading out the costs across third-party sellers, crushing competition. Amazon even operates outside of retail, creating hardware such as home security hardware, and they have long had a $600 million contract with the CIA to use Amazon's servers. These are in addition to their retail profits. But isn't it weird how big tech companies are allowed to potentially violate antitrust laws by running any and all businesses they want, even if they can use unlimited funds to enter new markets and immediately crush small businesses and competitors? Facebook runs the largest social media site and also monopolizes the virtual reality market with Oculus. It's almost as if anti-monopoly laws don't apply to rich corporations. However, if you or I tried to open, say, a restaurant, a farm, or a shop, there are coding, zoning, vending, and licensing laws to obstruct who and where poor and working people can create businesses. This is partially under the premise that opening a restaurant, a farm, or a shop in a residential area would hurt small businesses. And it assumes that everyone has a car and the means to travel to and from retail sectors. But tech companies like Amazon are allowed to externalize their costs to small businesses on their platforms, coerce competitors to use their platform, steal competitors' sales data, and use it to provide competing products at cheaper costs, thus helping to crush small businesses. That's not democracy under any definition of the word, nor is it even a free market. Nor do large corporations ever have to preserve the sanctity of residential areas if it doesn't serve their business interests. What you have is rich people and politicians who changed or circumvented laws to divert the flow of money directly or often indirectly back to themselves, while not allowing poor and working people to do the same. Astute observers might call it money laundering or even liken it to a cartel. The rich donate to politicians to get a return on investment. As a famous 2014 Princeton study shows, almost all legislation passed is in favor of the rich, against the will of grassroots movements and poor and working people. Other countries are often called oligarchies, but the US has the richest and most powerful billionaires in the world. They donate to politicians, both major political parties, encourage tax cuts, corporate handouts, bailouts, and essentially corporate welfare and favoritism of the rich. In a country with increasing poverty, homelessness, and inequality, the people who need help the most never receive it. The poor and unhoused never receive a pandemic relief check, even though they needed it the most. They don't receive equal health care, even though we have the data and know that people with mental health issues and the disabled are disproportionately pushed out onto the streets. Instead, police budgets continue to increase, which is often taken out on the homeless, criminalizing where they sleep and the methods they use to survive. We have the data and we already know that people with substance addictions are pushed out onto the street. But instead of taking any action against the pharmaceutical industry that knowingly created an opioid epidemic, the victims of that epidemic are often criminalized and brutalized by that system. Note, the pharmaceutical industry is massively wealthy and has always been one of the biggest lobbyists in Washington, despite Bayer Monsanto poisoning our food with glyphosate, insulin price gouging, and other crimes that if you or I committed them would put us in the deepest jail cell for life. The truth is, the rich could not be successful in a fair system. They are mediocre people who could not be successful if we forced them to be fair. They are dependent on the poor and working people to use anti-democratic measures to crush all of our alternatives. The famous Princeton study from 2014 strongly supported that the US is an oligarchy. Do you think such a system allows the choice of the individual a fair shot against the choice of the rich, corporations, or politicians? There is no equality. There is no democracy, and there is little choice within the system. And that's by design, because the rich would not be rich in a fair system. The powerful would not be powerful in a fair system. It has to be rigged for it to work. Capitalism has to be a rigged game for the wealth to continue flowing to the undeserved rich in high places. And this is one of the reasons we can't keep blaming each other for the problems of the poor and working people. The rich use class division, aka culture wars, to keep us attacking each other. And while culturally we have massive divides, the greatest exploitation and the ones exacerbating the divides are at the top. If you have ever met or worked with rich people, you know that they did not take on their positions as if they were chosen, prophesized children who worked the hardest and earned 90+% of the gains. You know that they are often mediocre people who were either spoiled with generational wealth and riches, or even better, they grew up with some struggles, but were spoiled later in life by wealth and riches, and are able to blame other poor and struggling people for poverty. Poverty is not a creation of the poor. It is a necessary evil within capitalism, used to threaten workers with homelessness, hunger, and despair so they will take low wages and poor working conditions. Poverty is a labor pool for the prison industrial complex. Poverty isn't an unexpected byproduct of capitalism, it is a foundational requirement. Poverty is not a just punishment for drug users. The rich do coke, heroin, Molly, and every drug you can think of. People with substance addictions are often victims of the pharmaceutical industry and healthcare industry who could not afford treatment and were targeted by the opioid crisis, which was willfully created. The Sackler family not only created the opioid crisis, they created the treatment for it as well, and they were sued and gained immunity from the courts so they could not be held accountable. Immunity, or as I think of it, impunity. The rich can kill and murder us for profit, and then be protected from punishment. And as always, it's worse than that. They're rewarded. They're allowed to continue and move on to the next exploitative and cruel profit scheme. Exploitation doesn't stop at the people. The environment is exploited as well. And who owns the environment? The people do. Exxon doesn't own the oil. Bill Gates doesn't own the farmland. In a system of fairness, we all own all of those things. Capitalism steals it from you and gives it to the rich to control. Think of how small communities would naturally operate without reliance, or I should say intrusion, by billionaires and corporations controlling everyone and everything. The inequality is massively exacerbated by the rich and used to divide us and keep them rich. When people run the system, they don't have to create artificial scarcity to increase profits so that some of them can become independently wealthy and separate themselves from society. Money is a tool used to create artificial scarcity. Capitalists would tell you that money is a tool intended to give healthcare, food, and other needs to everyone, but it has managed to do the opposite, turning basic needs like food, housing, and healthcare into luxuries for the highest bidders. Imagine a system without money, in which we have to trade goods and services. There is no scarcity of food or housing, so no one would have to starve or go unhoused. In a system with no scarcity of food or housing, how would a billionaire or a millionaire ever exist? Imagine if one person or one company was able to go into an independent, self-reliant community and steal most of the money and resources created by that community. Well, then you would basically have US foreign policy in which the US overthrows democracies to steal their resources from other countries and give them to corporations, particularly the oil industry. That's why capitalism and imperialism go together. What we have now is a system where the money is distributed across politicians, CEOs, boards of directors, executives, managers, etc. And that is true for company after company across the economic system. But with all of this wealth and power and the biggest military empire in the world, we don't have a real healthcare system to show for it. We have increasing poverty and increasing housing crisis, and possibly worst of all, we have nothing to show for all of the wealth and power, but the collapse of the ecosystem and destruction of the environment, which is ultimately a destruction of housing for all of humanity. In a fair system, billionaires would never exist. Millionaires would never exist. Power would never be concentrated in a small group of individuals with ill-gotten wealth. Only in a fair system without billionaires would people begin to have freedom and democracy.